What's up, everybody? It's your boy. Uh, Thinking about how I want to update things for the channel. It's been a while since I've did a proper podcast, and I'm on the road to Davenport, and I'm thinking about how I want things to go moving forward. And so, here's everything that's been on my mind. I kind of feel like I have these two distinct things that I'm really passionate about and are really important to me. And one of them is relationships. And I feel like the relationship stuff and the work that I did on that is all super important. It's been really positive for some people. It's one of my strongest areas, and it's the thing that I believe that a lot of people are looking for more advice with, but and help with. But I could have that wrong, and maybe there's less people who are interested in that than I think. I don't know. It kind of seems like it's one of those areas where people are becoming more siloed and more private and think that nobody else can give them any advice. And I think that's because there's so much out there that's bad advice, or people try the advice and it doesn't work and they don't know why. And that's the irony, is I feel like I'm trying to answer those questions because I had those same questions. I'm trying to solve that problem. I'm trying to figure out why does this issue not make any sense? Why do we have so much advice out there that doesn't work? Why are there so many books and places to go, and none of them seem to have good answers as far as how to improve that or make anything better? And so that's why it's been such a passion of mine. Sometimes take it the wrong way or misinterpret the goal. I mean, I'm trying to create a path. I don't buy into the mindset very much that the what will work for your relationship is different for every relationship. Like, there has to be certain things, principles, we could say, certain principles in play, and certain things functionally that are correct. So I'll give an example of how I think about this. And I think this is important. If someone says, here's a prescription for a relationship that works, maybe it's not a specific one night every week. Maybe it's one night every month. This part can vary depending on your relationship. But what you absolutely have to have is you have to have a scheduled date night. Like, you need that, right? This is a common prescription. You see it in a lot of relationship advice type things. You see it a lot of. It's either right or it's wrong. That's either a good thing or it's not. You know, that's either helpful and universal or it's not. I don't really see a universe where, you know, regularly scheduled time together is just neutral, and maybe it works for some and maybe it doesn't work for others. And, I think there's got to be right and wrong answers to some of this stuff. And that's what I tried to start, you know, answering with some of my videos on this topic. But before we can even ask those questions, we have to figure out what we even mean by relationships and what we think their properties are and what we think we're doing with that. And that's the thing that I find so few people know anything about. They're sure they're in one, and they know they're happy, and they know they love their partner. And yet, so many people, you ask them like at the end of things, and so many of these things have an endpoint, and they go, "What went wrong?" And from day to day, their answer changes because they don't really know. They can't put their finger on it. And that was my goal with that whole topic, is to try and put my finger on that. So I think that's its own separate project, and I think it's an important one. And I think there's philosophical reasons. Obviously, I argue for something called a sweet spot model of relationships, where we throw out a lot of the existing norms and a lot of the existing ideas and concepts of what people think are the recipe for healthy relationships, and try to look at it from a totally fresh new perspective. And the reason I do that, and I make my case, is that I don't think anything that we've been trying for a couple hundred years now has been very effective or working at all. People seem to be in a steady decline over time in terms of relationship quality. There are some markers that are going up, but there are some markers that are going very, very down. So that's the one project. Project two is what average people talking started as, which is kind of this politics kind of show. And the problem is, as time goes on, I really don't like the word politics. It's not politics. Politics at the end of the day is philosophy done badly. It's like a bunch of people disagree about this thing, and it becomes like, by definition, politics is about winning a fight. And I think the core mission of what I have tried to accomplish is to avoiding the fight. There has to be right and wrong answers to certain questions. Whether or not we should do a wealth tax, there's a right and wrong answer to that. And the underlying reason to do it or not do it, on one level, has the practical implications, which is what people tend to only ever talk about as the political side. But it also has moral implications, deeply philosophical moral implications. We're either right to do it or we're wrong to do it in a very deep and meaningful way. And I've tried to explore kind of that territory. And one of the things I started to realize as I dove into that topic more and more, it's very clear that we are missing how important free will is in terms of how people think about virtually almost every single political issue. At the end of the day, what do you think about the red pill movement and, like, male empowerment and all of these other terms? Are men being persecuted in society, or are they on the downward trend? Have we become a women focused society? Whatever. All of that actually comes down to, um, it really kind of backs us up into this universe where we don't even know what we're talking about unless we can figure out what we mean by free will. And here's why I say that. So much of this is believed to be a product of personal choices. Like, people have collectively made individual personal choices to systematically try and shove men into these kind of holes of, this and that. And then people feel disenfranchised by what they call the ultra feminist movement, and they get frustrated. And then they blame that, like, they think that it's got to be some kind of personal choice that people got together and decided men had power for too long, and now it's time to shift it back to women. Then it comes back to the feminist movement is sometimes confused because it also treats men as if they systematically made personal choices, in a free will kind of sense of personal choices, to oppress women. And I don't really think most men do that. I think they created systems without knowing what they were creating that systematically pushed women out and kept women out. But women do that too in certain circumstances without really thinking about it. We create exclusive tribalistic spaces. That's a kind of a natural, apish urge that we tend to do. It's not always necessarily a bad thing. I don't know that men, need to be at the baby shower, okay? And I don't know that women need to be involved in locker room talk. Maybe there are certain places where being around only, people of the same gender makes sense. I don't know. I'm agnostic about all that. What I know is that free will, in terms of how we judge each other in that space and how we consider each other's feelings, is doing a lot of the work in people's thinking. I hear it all the time. I hear people who are, more on the, women's liberation front, so angry, and they're convinced that men are actively making these choices to suppress female voices and this kind of thing. And I think when you don't believe in free will, it's hard to hate in this space. You're just trying to find what is the ignorance between these two issues. That's one example. Here's another example. What you think, about abortion is largely dictated by your religious stance, but your religious stance is largely dictated by whether or not you think we have libertarian free will. So, you look at an issue like that, and it's pretty easy to see. It's pretty easy to see that, like, free will kind of ruins the whole Bible story from chapter one, right? Like, if we don't have this whole story of like making the choice to do the original sin and that being ultimately our fault and taking ultimate responsibility for that, and realizing that that's just a product of biological apish urges of whether or not we're going to eat the fruit. And obviously, you can take the whole story with a grain of salt. There probably wasn't a serpent in a garden with only two people, because that's biologically nonsensical. But I mean, even if you just take the metaphorical sense, even if we think of that story as a metaphor, it's still flawed because the metaphor relies on a notion of free will to get off the ground. Like, if there's no free will, of course she was going to eat the apple. So are you. So is everybody in that position. If you have a choice to know something or not know something, you are powerless to want the knowledge over not knowledge. It is innately human nature. You have a deep desire and a thirst for human knowledge. And so, where I'm going with this is that for this other show, I feel like, centering it around this, making it more a specific topic and how that topic impacts every other topic. I'm really passionate about how free will is, but I feel like that's not very marketable, and most people wouldn't find that very interesting. My thinking is very different on that than most people. I don't think they realize it's running their software all the time, every day. But it is. I mean, I see it sitting in Starbucks and people having a side conversation that I happen to overhear, and it's like, the amount of judgment that you apply to other individual choices and how you perceive people positively or negatively all comes down to free will. It infects every part of your decision. Whether or not you judge somebody's financial situation often comes down to, do you think they made choices that is the reason that they're there, and what could change it. And when you're operating from where I'm sitting, a lot of this is often just ignorance, as in somebody doesn't know how good it could be or what they're missing, and if they only knew that, they would have made a different choice. you know I think that different choices are a product of the knowledge we have or don't have. Not there's no conversation to be had if somebody just says, "Well, that's just the choices they made." Okay, well, that's just a boring conversation stopper, and it's not really interesting to talk about. So that's kind of the second thing. I could leave it as average people talking and leave it more open to different topics and just kind of start focusing on this free will thing more and more. But I have some interesting show topics, and I want to have more guests and do more of that stuff. So this is what's on my mind. I'm looking for feedback, hopefully, and throw it some in the comments and share with me, if any of this would be of interest to you and what you think. I'm trying to figure this out and make space for good thought, good discussion, good dialogue, and make some progress. So I would love to hear from you all on what you think, what direction I should take it, and should I branch off the relationship stuff into its own side project, likely called The Sweet Spot, or In the Sweet Spot is the kind of the name I'm leaning towards in the theme, because that's really what it's all about, is finding the right sweet spot between you and all your relationships and living a wholesome, better life. And ultimately, that's the project. The whole reason of having these conversations is every chance to talk to somebody. Every conversation is an opportunity to make the world a marginally better place. And that's what I want to do. So um, let's do that. Let's do that together. Help me with ideas. Let me know what direction